Welcome to the Property Buyer Podcast, where we explore the world of residential and commercial real estate to help you make better decisions about buying, selling, or investing in all types of property. Join me, Rich Harvey, CEO of Propertybuyer.com.au and multi-award-winning buyer's advocate. Our podcast features expert interviews, market trends and insights, and practical tips for navigating the complex world of Australian real estate. Whether you're a home buyer, a seasoned property investor, commercial buyer, developer, or simply curious about the property market, our podcast is for you. Join us as we share our knowledge, strategies, and experience and help you achieve your property goals. Well, welcome to the Property Buyer Podcast. I'm your host, Rich Harvey, and today we're asking the question, how can you create real wealth during your lifetime, and how can you develop the right mindset and action plan to get there? I'm delighted to welcome Jackson Millan, widely recognised as the wealth mentor, to the Property Buyer Podcast. Jackson's got over 16 years experience in the financial and business sectors. He's dedicated his career to empowering service-based business owners like myself scale their profits, enhance their cash flow, and build personal wealth. He's also the co-founder and chief dreamer at Aureus Financial, where he's guided over 1,000 clients to build a combined net worth of over $3 billion. His innovative values-based advice model has redefined financial coaching. Today, we're going to be looking at the top wealth secrets and mindsets for financial freedom. It's a big topic, and we're going to delve into Jackson's strategies for financial success, including property and beyond, and look at how his methodologies can be applied in real life. So whether you're just a seasoned investor or you're just starting out, Jackson has some fantastic insights, and it's great to have you on the podcast. Welcome, Jackson.
Pleasure to be here, mate. Looking forward to hopefully sharing some golden nuggets.
Well, every 5 minutes a nugget comes out of your mouth, knowing you. So, well, today I'm going to throw you not under the bus, but throw you a thought of the week. And the thought is, it's never too late to be what you might have been, says George Eliot. What do you take from that quote?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's one of the quotes similar to what my father used to tell me as a kid. He said, Confucius famously said, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago and the second best time is today. And I think we often dwell in the potential of what has been, and we lose sight of the potential of what could be. And this is often the biggest thing that gets in the way of people sitting on the fence and procrastinating, because they feel, oh, maybe I've missed the boat, maybe it's too late, and they just give up before they've even given it a good crack.
Yeah, so true. You know, I'm an economist in my past, and one of the things I learned is that people value losses more than they value gains. In other words, they kind of want to hang on to just where they're at. They're not willing to take any kind of risk to just step out and make a bit more, you know, so that cost of procrastination is huge, isn't it?
I agree with you, mate. And one of the principles that we've built all of our coaching systems around is that loss aversion bias. It's actually been proven that people feel the emotion of loss twice as significantly as the emotion of gain. And from my mind, we need to then put in twice as much energy and effort, or create twice as much excitement to get over that initial inertia and create the momentum to move forward. And as you go through and create more complexity and build more wealth, that resistance becomes even larger and more significant. And this is the importance of having really good wealth building systems, because without them, you can stall for very long periods of time and fall short of your goals.
Well, let's unpack that a bit more. I want to throw you a big question up front. And what does the words financial freedom mean to you? And how do you define true wealth beyond money? What does that all mean?
Yeah, what's interesting, mate, is that you can speak to 1,000 different people and get 1,000 different answers. And I think that's really important, is because we need to form our own definition of what that financial freedom means, looks like, and the significance of that to each of us. But for me personally, it's always been about being able to do what I want, when I want, with whom I want, if I even want to do it at all. And more than freedom, it's actually choice. It's having the ability to have an abundance of choice without sacrifice, compromise, or scarcity.
I really like that choice. For me, it means the similar thing, mate. I think I really like the idea of choice. It's not about whoever has the most toys wins or how big your bank account is. It's having money is a means to an end. Like, it's a means to freedom. It's a means to living your dream lifestyle. It's a means to obtaining satisfaction. But also, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right, we sort of live in this subsistence basis, and then we move through to the highest form of living, which in my mind is contribution, is giving back.
Yes.
And I think, you know, Jesus said it's better to be a giver rather than a receiver. And I think as people go through life and they get to that sort of beyond wealth stage. What do you say to that sort of thought about being a contributor?
Yeah, I agree with that, mate. I'm a big believer in getting to that point of self-actualization. One of the first models I created in my first best-selling book, Enjoy the Journey, was called the Wealth Pyramid.
Mm.
And we actually built it around Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And what I identified, Rich, is that there's basically 5 stages that anybody's going to go through in their wealth journey.
Mm.
And stage 1 is financial battle. This is where we're
Yep.
basically spending more than we're making and
Mm.
we're drowning financially. Stage 2 is financial comfort, where we make enough to make ends meet and we live comfortable, but there's no surplus, so we're treading water.
Mm.
Then we get to stage 3, which is financial growth, where we've got surplus and we're making that work for us and we're saving, we're paying down debt, we're building wealth, potentially all of those things. And then we get to financial freedom and we simplify that into really 2 key milestones. One is owning your home and having it paid off in full. And second is having enough passive income outside of your business or employment where you can have the freedom to choose what you do with your time.
Mm.
And then stage 5 is financial abundance, where you've got more wealth than you could ever spend and ever need, and you can give back to family, friends, charity, causes that you believe in. And that may not just be money,
Mm.
but it's being able to buy back your time so then you can contribute your time, your skill sets, your expertise to those causes that are dear to your heart.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love those 5 stages. So for anyone listening, that's a really good way or hierarchy to look at that wealth building paradigm. I really like that. Now, Jackson, you've written and also read a lot of books and podcasts.
Yes.
What are some of the most common limiting beliefs that you see people have around this whole idea of wealth creation? What's holding them back?
There's a lot that's holding them back, mate. And the unfortunate reality of it is that it all starts with the fact that none of us have been given a pragmatic and objective education around money. And even for those of us who go to university, many of it is very corporate. One of my biggest frustrations was going through and studying to become a financial advisor. And after being accredited, leaving feeling like I was more confused than when I started.
Wow.
And
Mm.
if a professional who's gone through an accreditation process doesn't have confidence, then what chance has anybody else got?
Yep.
And the unfortunate reality is for most people is that they have a subjective education that's through osmosis. It's
Mm.
their own first-hand experiences and often mistakes,
Mm.
or those subjective opinions and experiences of those
Mm.
closest to them, their
Mm.
family, their friends.
The school of
And
experience
sure,
is a pretty harsh teacher, isn't it? So, yeah.
it certainly is, mate, because you might be very lucky and your
Mm.
parents might have been very affluent and made some great decisions. But usually that comes with a lot of bias as well. Like there's the property people and the shares people, right?
Mm.
And what that often leads and reinforces is that for many of us, we get frustrated because we've turned up to the equivalent of learning German and we're upset because we haven't mastered it in the first lesson.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
this is what gets people off to the wrong start. And I think what reinforces that, Rich, is that we have this constant comparison in this age of social media. And as it was famously said,
Mm.
comparison is the thief of joy.
Mm.
And I feel so many people are living out other people's dreams because they've never been taught how to define their own.
The comparison curse you talk about is so prevalent, not just with young people, but with anyone at any stage. And it's like, yeah, I'm not keeping up with that person. Look at their car, look at their house, look at their job. And it's so much dissatisfaction around. But wealth can mean so much to different people. And I think it's really important to run your own race, run your own journey, and work out what your long-term goals are. But, it's been proven only 3% of people set goals, right?
Yes.
It's pretty poor.
Yeah, and this is
Yeah.
one of the biggest challenges, mate, that people mistake wealth as the destination when it should be the vehicle.
Mm.
And this is where many people get stuck. Like I even get people who've already accumulated 8 figures in wealth that reach out to us and they're just overwhelmed by choice of what they do next.
Mm.
And almost exclusively, that is driven by the fact that they haven't clearly defined what it is that they're actually trying to achieve and why they are trying to achieve it.
Mm.
Because when we can define the destination, and we can get clear on the home that you want to live in, when you want to be debt free, the school you want to send your kids to, the holidays you want, how you want those holidays to change over time, your hobbies, interests, the quality of your lifestyle, even the wine you want to drink, all of those things can be defined and quantified.
Mm.
And then that can actually be reverse engineered into a financial roadmap, which becomes essentially a pass or fail framework.
Mm,
And it makes it so much easier to navigate financial decisions of should I buy property? Should I pay down debt? Should I invest in shares, put money into super, so on and so forth?
mm,
Because all of those vehicles are either going to move us closer to achieving that roadmap or are going to move us further away. And the decision becomes very binary.
mm. I want to talk about mindsets with you. How
Yes.
important is someone's identity in shaping their financial outcomes, and how can someone shift from being a spender to being a wealth creator in their
Well,
mindsets?
here's the interesting thing, Rich. I am a spender. So I have ADHD, and as a neurodivergent person, early in my career, I didn't realize I went undiagnosed for a very long time. And I found myself being the do what I say, not what I do advisor. Like
Mm,
I've always taken a lot of pride in helping my clients
mm,
achieve their goals and build the best possible wealth strategy that would get them there. But then I would feel guilty because I wasn't practicing what I preached and I wasn't making pragmatic decisions around my money. And I'm like, wow, this isn't congruent. It doesn't
mm.
align with what I'm teaching.
Yeah.
And what I come to realize is that the vast majority of wealth creation principles are built on the idea of scarcity.
Hmm.
So in order for me to build wealth for the future, I must sacrifice and compromise today and defer gratification and endure pain for long periods of time in order to have a brighter future. And that never motivated me.
Mm.
And what was interesting is that this is something that many neurodivergent people struggle with because deferring gratification is almost impossible because our future versions of ourselves are almost a stranger to us today.
Yeah, right. Mm. So
So
what shifted in your own mindset then? How did you
what
get
was
to?
interesting, mate, is that I discovered an experiment called the marshmallow experiment.
I think I've heard
And
of
the
this one.
marshmallow,
Yeah.
yeah, it's really cool. And what happened is that Stanford University wanted to work out, is the ability to defer gratification a learned skill or is it an inherited skill? So they took 4 and 5-year-old kids and they put them in a room. They gave them a marshmallow and they said, hey, I'm going to leave the room. And if I come back and you haven't eaten the marshmallow, I'll give you a second marshmallow. And what interestingly happened was that 1 out of 2 of the children was able to defer gratification and wait. And 2 out of 3 would eat the marshmallow within the period of time. I think it was 15 minutes.
Mm.
Now, my neurodivergent mind immediately thought, who decided that it was either 1 now or 2 later?
Mm-hmm.
Who's stopping me from having 1 now and 2 later?
Mm.
And as a business owner, this is where I had an epiphany moment that I said, my falling short of my goals, both now and into the future, comes not from an absence of financial means, but it comes from an absence of financial planning.
Love
And
that.
if I could just create a roadmap that allowed me to have my cake and eat it too, that
Mm-hmm.
allowed me to live a great lifestyle and
Mm-hmm.
do all of the things that I want to do and have enough surplus that I could prepare for my future and achieve all of these amazing things, what would need to happen?
Mm.
And this was an epiphany, and this has become the basis of how we work with our clients who are primarily business owners because they have more control over their ability to control their income, and has allowed us to help thousands have their cake and eat it too as well.
I love what you're describing here. This is fantastic. You're describing that we limit ourselves in, okay, so the cake can only be 20 centimeter tin, right? You're
Correct.
going, what the hell? I'm going to make 3 cakes. What the hell? I'm going to use
Exactly.
different ingredients. I'm going to have 2 ovens. Like I just love the abundance mentality you bring to this journey. That's fantastic, mate. Well done.
And
That's
what it comes down to is understanding the levers, because
mm,
like once again, Confucius said, he who said he can and he who said he can't are both right.
yeah.
We can hold the perspective of having a scarcity of means and a
Mm,
limitation on our ability to earn an income, or
mm,
we can assume that we have influence even if we just don't know how to influence it yet. And it was
fantastic.
really interesting when I come up with this concept and I took it to my compliance manager when I was working at a big bank. He almost had a stroke.
Mm.
He goes, Jackson, you can't advise your clients to earn more money. And I said, show me anywhere in ASIC's documentation where
Yeah.
I cannot.
Yeah.
Like, and we battled backwards and forwards. And in fact,
Mm,
he wasn't able to find any evidence that
mm,
prevented me from doing such.
mm,
And then I was able to develop a really long track history of just being able to say, hey, Rich, you want to achieve all of these goals. This is exactly how much you need to earn based on how much you're going to spend. And this is going to give you this much surplus. And if you allocate it in this way, then we can achieve all of these things.
yeah.
And of
Brilliant.
course, if for whatever reason you don't hit those milestones, then we're going to have to reevaluate and have trade-off conversations. But let's work towards plan A, and then we can work through plan B, C, D if we need to.
Yeah. So it sounds like a lot of people who've kind of almost tried to demotivate you or put you in a cage have actually motivated you. And you're saying that a lot of people's conservatism is actually holding them back from achieving their wealth
Correct.
goals. Yeah.
And what
Yeah.
was interesting, mate, is that wealth pyramid concept that I introduced before, I then evolved it again. And what I realized is that each of those 5 stages was a lag indicator for a series of decisions and pathways that any particular person has chosen to get them to that point. Because let's say, for example, you're listening to this today and you are in financial comfort. You're treading water. You can't change that reality right now because it is what it is. But there are certain decisions and pathways that you've chosen that have got you to that point.
Yeah.
So what I started studying is what were the mental states that indicated why people were most likely to be in that stage. And then if they just worked on trying to elevate that mental state, that identity, and step in and create that space that they could step into with the right strategy and the right action, how could we shift the result?
Yep.
So when we think about financial battle, we talk about that being stage 1, but 1.1 is the stage of the victim. Because a victim, frankly, can't be helped because they're too busy pointing the finger and blaming everybody else.
Yeah.
And it's not until they go to 1.2, which is what we call the survivor or the battler, that they make the decision that, okay, I'm going to own this situation and I'm going to battle my way out of it. And frankly, that was my parents. They were battlers. And it's interesting. We've got this kind of colloquial term of the Aussie battler that people almost wear as a badge of honor these days. And the interesting thing is that when you're a battler, the situations you learn to survive, your survival ultimately depends upon.
Yeah.
It becomes a vicious cycle that you survive a situation, but then you subconsciously put yourself back into that shitty situation again.
Yeah.
And it's like Groundhog Day. So then we get to financial comfort, and that's 2.1 is the worker.
Yep.
And the worker basically just knows how to trade time for money. They know how to provide and they know how to create that level of comfort, but once again, they can't create leverage. So then we get to 2.2 where we become the player, and the player understands that there is leverage that can be created and they start trading outcomes for money. And this is where we start with that surplus, using it to buy property and use leverage to magnify our position, because there's only so much you can do in terms of your earnings, and your earned income's never going to make you wealthy, right?
Yeah. People got to realize there's a step. It doesn't happen overnight, right?
Exactly. So then we get to 3.1, which is the performer. And the performer typically needs to manage players because they need to ensure that they've got high value people in their corner. They've got high value mentors in their corner. They've got high value team members in their corner. And that's where they start trading money for money. And this then gets them to the point of the conductor, where they're basically conducting the orchestra. And then we work towards the biggest shift is becoming a trustee. And a trustee is where we've achieved financial freedom and we now need to trust in our ability to manage our money because it's a fundamentally different skill set of making money and keeping it.
Yep. Fantastic.
Then we become a composer and we become a hero, and then eventually we become a legend. And you don't decide if you're a legend. Other people will decide that you're a legend when you're no longer of this earth. But of these 10 stages, it's really clear that people can then work out, well, where am I at right now? Let's say I'm a player. How do I become a performer and do the activities that are going to firmly cement myself in financial growth? And this minimizes the menu of options, therefore making it much easier for you to reinforce and create that new identity to step into.
This is fantastic. I'm just going to summarize just for a second and pause and just say what you've just said there, just so our audience catches up, because mate, with ADHD, you're running a million miles. I love it. It's fantastic. Your brain is moving so fast. I love it. But it's about, you're saying that we're a product of our past decisions and we need to take responsibility instead of becoming a victim of that. Then we need to have the right mental state to make the first step. And then we've got to learn to use leverage to increase wealth. And then we go through those various stages of learning on the wealth building journey. So, mate, love all of those mindset things. I want to turn now, just move on from mindset. We'll come back to mindset a bit, but talk about some wealth building principles. What are the kind of top 3 principles that you think every person should follow to start building sustainable wealth?
Yes. So we created a framework that's called the investment operating system. And once again, this is about giving people the confidence to know the levers that they can influence in order to achieve their goals. And it would be remiss of me just to share 3. There's actually 9, and I can fire through them pretty quickly.
Sure.
And it's a series of 9 questions that people need to constantly ask. And this will allow you to focus on which lever has the highest sensitivity in order for you to elevate and magnify your wealth position. So first and foremost, number 1 question is, what can I do to grow my income?
Yep.
Question number 2 is, what can I do to control my expenses? Question number 3 is, what do I need to have available in my war chest to give me peace of mind?
Like a buffer. Yep.
Exactly. 4 is, what are my lifestyle goals?
Yep.
5 are, what are my financial goals that I want to achieve?
Yep.
Number 6 is, how do I allocate my surplus to achieve my goals and manage my risk?
Yep.
7 is, what is my return expectation? 8 is, how will I use leverage to accelerate or magnify my results, and can I afford it?
Yep.
And 9 is, how does my net wealth currently have me on track?
Great questions. I love that you started with income, because
Yes.
a lot of people, come to our business and go, Rich, I just want to retire on $250,000 a year. I go, great. Let's work out a roadmap to get there. I'm currently earning 75 grand and I don't really want to work any harder than what I'm working. Okay, well, let's start there. Okay, so do you think you're going to increase your income? Oh, no, I'm just happy in this kind of level of work. Okay, well, it might take you a little bit longer to get where you want to get to. So
yeah. The math doesn't math, does it?
No, yeah. And I think the best investment a lot of us can make, and I was taught this at a very young age, is actually in yourself. I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on my own financial education, and I was happy to pay every cent, because I've made 100-fold, in everything I've spent on that. So a lot of people think that, oh, why should I do that course? Why should I buy that book? Honestly, even your books are fantastic, mate. For $25, you can get some brilliant knowledge. But it's one thing to have the knowledge. It's another thing to put it into action, right? So
correct.
We really appreciate you tuning in to the Property Buyer Podcast, and I hope that you're finding our expert interviews helpful. So that we can keep providing this information and growing our audience, we rely on word-of-mouth recommendations. If you found this information useful, could I please ask you to share this podcast with your friends, family and colleagues, and ask them to subscribe to the Property Buyer Podcast. It would be a big help, and we'd be very grateful for your support. Thanks once again for sharing the links. And now let's get back to the podcast.
And this is really important, particularly in the market that we're in, because we all love property. Like, we live and breathe property, and all of our clients do as well. But in this environment that we're in, particularly given that our banks are so conservative, that you have a finite debt capacity, that debt ceiling, and you are likely going to erode it within 2 or 3 properties. So unless you have the ability to grow your income and increase your servicing capacity, there is absolutely no way that 98% of people out there are going to be able to build that $250,000 in passive income.
That's it.
And it's just, it's one of these things that people overlook it, and then they get stuck, and then they go try to get the next property and say, hey, sorry, computer says no. Better luck next time.
Yeah, that's it. So how do you help clients align their financial goals with their personal values?
Yes. The big part that we work through is we build what we call the 20-year roadmap with our clients. And what that involves is actually going through and documenting all of their lifestyle and financial goals over 1, 5, 10, 15, and 20 years. And this essentially becomes the basis of all the things that they have as goals, dreams, and aspirations. And what we go through is we go and then find the significance that links to each of those goals, dreams, and aspirations. And what's interesting is that they will then start defining their values around those goals. Because for some of them, they might be like, oh, well, I want a Porsche. Okay, well, what's the significance of that goal to you? And they go, oh, I don't know. Well, okay, if you can't find significance, then it's probably not something that you highly value. Do we just put that in the ego-based thing that it would be a nice to have? And this allows them to then start creating prioritization, right? Compared to, hey, I want this house in Narrabeen, and it's 4 bedrooms, and it's 5-minute walk to the beach, and I want to be able to have it paid off in 5 years. Well, what's the significance of that? Well, it gives the house that I want to raise my family in, and it's been my dream forever. And having that home paid off gives us the safety and security to know that we've always got a base. Wow, there's significance there, right?
It's the meaning, it's the driver is what you're looking for, right?
100%. So then what that then means is that when we use our financial modeling software, that we basically put all of these goals and aspirations in, and then we forecast it out over the entirety of their life to age 100. And then we show them what the impacts of all of these decisions are, and we take them through the trade-offs and show them what levers they'd need to pull out of those 9 in order to maximize their probability of success. Then it becomes a living and breathing plan that they are invested in, that aligns with their values and is a representation of what financial freedom looks like to them.
Yeah, fantastic. Wonderful. Love that. All right. A lot of people think of wealth building as being really complicated and financial planning being really just over the top. But what role does simplicity, come into this area? How do you simplify things and don't
Yeah,
overcomplicate it?
simplicity is key because, as I mentioned before, we have some very sophisticated people reach out to us who have basically built empires out of ego. And they're usually very successful business people who often develop a mindset of the Midas touch, that everything that they touch turns to gold. And they then start going into property development, and they start trading stocks and CFDs, and they start trading crypto, and they do business deals and this and that. And ultimately their wealth becomes another full-time job. So not only are they running their business and trying to live their lives, but they now have this burden of responsibility. And one of my most favorite sayings is the killer of dreams is the burden of responsibility.
Yeah.
And the harsh reality of a lot of these decisions is they can be very hard to undo. So I'm a big believer of simple, and our whole investment philosophy and what we've used to help our clients build over 3 billion in combined wealth is that there are 3 ways to make money in this world. There's business, there's property, and there's shares. And ultimately, I don't have any bias towards any of those 3. Each of them have pros and cons, and they achieve a very different thing depending on the life stage and the goals and aspirations of the individual. So what we want to do is we want to educate our clients around the fundamentals that drive results in each of those 3 things. We want to show them how to accumulate them pragmatically without emotion and with systems and process around the appropriate capital allocation. And we want to ensure that they understand the responsibilities of management on an ongoing basis, wherever possible, trying to make it as simple as we possibly can.
Yeah,
So
fantastic.
what that looks like is, in business, either we want to build a business that has significant surplus cash flows that allows us to live our lifestyle and have a considerable personal surplus we can use to build wealth.
Yep.
And secondly, we want to build a business that has a saleable asset, because in Australia, we have some of the best small business tax concessions in the world. For example, we can sell a business for up to $6 million completely tax-free, and in many cases get all of that money into superannuation, a zero tax environment from 60 plus, and not pay $1 of tax on that money.
Yeah, great.
So that's a tremendous opportunity. And for some of our clients, they also choose to acquire businesses because it can be a phenomenal way to build wealth.
Yes.
But it's not for everyone. Then secondly, property. We're very aligned with your philosophy, Rich, that we want to buy good quality, blue chip property in desirable locations that has proven fundamentals for long-term performance. And we want to basically accumulate as many of those good quality properties as we can. The aim of the game is not 100 piddly little properties where you've got tenants punching holes in walls and doing crazy stuff.
Talk about time-sucking management too.
Exactly. It's horrible. And I've had clients come to me that have 15, 20, 30 property portfolios, and it is a nightmare. So we want to focus on buying as many good quality blue chip properties as we can afford.
All the hot water systems will blow on a Tuesday, So.
Exactly. Nightmare. So we focus, and we acknowledge that residential real estate is done because we have a magnification effect for borrowing, that it magnifies our cash on cash return, and it is primarily a capital growth play. We're not building a property portfolio for passive income. And then we build our share portfolio because if we really want passive income, we can go and buy a good quality blue chip share portfolio with 6 to 7% fully franked dividends, meaning the tax has already been paid at 30%. And if you're in drawdown phase 60 plus, that now means that you're getting 8 or 9% income without tenants, without hot water systems blowing, and without any ongoing real responsibility aside from managing the portfolio, which could take 30 minutes a month.
Perfect.
So it's about how do we build this portfolio and obviously choose the appropriate tax structure to hold those various things in order to ensure we don't pay any bonuses to the tax man along the way. It's pretty simple.
Love it. Love those 3 areas. So Jackson, for people that are like business owners or commission-based professionals who maybe have inconsistent income, what's your best advice for them in their ability to build financial stability and growth?
Yes. So we work with a lot of businesses that are seasonal. In fact, one of my best client case studies ran a a shuttle that was open for 3 months of the year. So talk about volatile income,
Wow.
right? And if there was a crappy ski season, then that obviously have a massive impact. So there's a huge reliance on the weather. And what we created was a cash flow system that synthetically created sustainability and structure. Because when we think about building wealth, we need systems.
Yep.
And systems require predictability. And for many of these individuals, whether they be real estate salespeople or high commission or seasonal business owners, they allow the seasonality and the volatility of their income to avoid setting up these systems. They're like, oh, I'm special. I can't do this. And ultimately what that means is that money is easy come, easy go. And they often spend more than what they should.
Yep.
So what we do is we set up what we call a drip account. So all of the income comes into a main account, and then we will siphon that out proportionately and equally each and every single month as if it were consistent. So let's say, for argument's sake, in that 3-month period of time, the business produces $3 million. We would drip that out on a consistent basis over the preceding 12 months as if it were providing $250,000 a month equally over 12 months.
Got it.
And what that allows us to do is to get out of the feast and famine and to create consistency in terms of the supporting wealth building systems that come from that. So we have a consistent amount of draw that we take for personal expenditure, living expenses, whatnot. We have a consistent automatic direct debit that we can put into the share portfolio. We can utilize that to service any loans or deficits we've got on our negatively geared property portfolio. And of course, we can have a really great war chest that we can have access to if emergencies happen. So the big thing is that if you have inconsistency, one, how do we create systems that get you off the roller coaster ride and allow you to drip feed? Because what I find is that inconsistency consumes precious mental bandwidth that could be better allocated elsewhere.
Yeah, great. Good answer.
And
Fantastic.
then once we've got that structure, it's about, well, then how do we challenge the status quo? How do we try and buffer against this seasonality? For example, with that client that had the chalet, we then started doing summer activities. What are other things we could do to diversify income so we're not so reliant on the season?
Yeah, fantastic. Love it. And I guess for business owners, a lot of business owners, like you say, they kind of, like the plumber that never fixes the leaky tap at home. What do you recommend for business owners in transforming their profit into personal wealth? What's the couple of things that they should be doing?
We reverse engineer it starting with the wealth piece in mind, because look, we've even had clients come to us who've been in significant cash flow deficits in their business. And we say, we'll take you through the process. And we always start with the wealth and the strategic planning. And they're like, we can't even think about wealth and financial freedom right now. We're drowning.
Yeah.
But why this is important is because if we can get clear on what financial freedom needs to look like, we can reverse engineer that and set the income target. We can work out how much surplus and how that needs to be allocated once we get there. We can set the profit target. We can reverse engineer that into the financial model of the business and the revenue. We can work out the clients, the leads that you need, which what that allows us to do is to connect the activity required to the outcome that intrinsically motivates you. And it will make it incredibly powerful for you to know exactly how that activity each and every single day, particularly through periods of hardship, of how that's contributing to get you closer to the things that really matter to you, as opposed to just grinding away and then saying, oh yeah, well, once we've got our head above water again, we'll then think about planning. No. We need to presuppose the plan and we need to work out the appropriate actions that get you up and out of that situation.
Just to cut in there, it's that daily activity. That's the takeaway I just got from your response there. It's the daily activity in their business. And then you'll set up a wealth plan and execute that wealth plan. As simple as that. Yeah. Wonderful. I want to talk about financial habits. What are the, specific habits that separate the wealthy from the average Joe?
Interesting, mate. I actually just made a post about this, and I believe there's 4. If I look at the most successful people in our client base, and I also look at the colleagues and friends of mine who are the most successful, there are basically 4 attributes. The first one is that you need to be deeply curious. Like you've got to have an unquenchable thirst for knowledge, and you need to be constantly chasing that rabbit hole deeper. Like highly successful people don't abdicate responsibility just because they don't know something. They learn it.
Yep.
Two, they're specialists. They are world class at a very particular skill set, and they would consider themselves in the top 1% in that area of specialization. And they've just obsessed over achieving mastery in that chosen discipline.
Yep.
Three, they operate at peak performance everywhere. So they prioritize their mental, their physical, their spiritual health, and they fiercely defend these against anyone or anything that will detract from it, even if that means that they need to be alone, because we are the average of the people that we surround ourselves with.
Yeah.
And four, they're fierce action takers. They do what they say and they say what they do. There's no space for procrastination or excuses, and they hold themselves to impossibly high standards because there's no other choice.
Love that. That's fantastic, mate. Love that. So curiosity, speciality, peak performance, and be an action taker. They're great habits. Wonderful. Talk to me about how you think about property investment fitting into the overall wealth plan. I know we touched on it, and let's talk about just where does it fit in, sort of what proportion does it make up maybe of someone's net worth, and also where do people go wrong with property?
Yeah, it's a significant part of our overall strategy with our clients because most of our clients are wealth accumulators. So I would say our typical client is in their mid 30s to 50s. They've got school age kids. They own their home. They've got a mortgage. There's some equity there. And because they've been focusing on the business, they need to play catch up in terms of wealth.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that is property. Because when we think about the numbers, even when we compare Australian real estate with shares, it's return about the same. Let's call it 9% on average. However, because we can borrow for that property, it magnifies our cash on cash return. So to keep my numbers round for everyone listening, if property goes up by 5% and you've put in, say, a 10% deposit and bought $1 million property, that property's gone up by 50 grand, but that's a 50% cash on cash return because you might have only put in 100 grand.
Yep.
And that magnified over a 10, 15, 20-year period of time, we can amass tremendous amounts of wealth with property. The other often overlooked aspect is the fact that inflation is paying off your debt for you. So it's the coupled effect of the compounding of the property, the cash on cash returns, and the role of inflation that ultimately means that we can build a tremendous amount of wealth with property if we do it the right way. Now, I'm not a property buyer or a buyer's agent. We refer to people like yourself, Rich, and I highly advocate that everyone uses a buyer's agent and not do it themselves. I personally would never buy a property again without a buyer's agent. And the reason for it is because we are too emotional. I'm certainly too emotional. And I get too stuck on the color of the kitchen and the front door and whatever, right? And it needs to be based on the fundamentals. And from my experience, our clients do best when they focus on the 5 key fundamentals. They buy in places that have net migration, more people moving there than are moving away, that there's diversified employment, that it's not reliant on any particular one sector, that there's infrastructure spending, both public and private, that there is a limit of future supply, because at the end of the day, property is about supply and demand. And that there's affordability that exists in that local market for rents and property prices to continue to be pushed up.
Mate, you can almost get a job with property buyers soon, mate. You're speaking like a true buyer's agent right there, mate. Taking the words right out of my mouth.
I've listened to you for long enough, mate, so it's rubbed off, I guess.
That's great to know. But it's funny you say about just the financial aspect of property. So just in my own journey, Jackson, like I studied economics when I finished school, and I sort of really wanted to create a nest egg for my family. That was my sort of significant meaning for building a wealth portfolio. But when I understood leverage, I used to be scared of debt, right? I was really scared of it. But once I understood your concept that you talk about, cash on cash return, I went, wow, why aren't more people doing this? You know, I was purely focused on paying my home loan down, but not understanding I was foregoing millions of dollars of equity growth by just focusing on one part of my property, my financial plan. So it's really important to get advice, because every dollar I've got, I can leverage it 5 times into a property.
Correct.
So it's phenomenal. Like I want to get as much of that OPM, other people's money or the bank's money, as I possibly can. I often have discussions every day with clients or potential clients about how much they should spend on a property. And they go, oh, look, I've got a borrowing capacity of about 750, but I just want to spend 600. And I'm going, well, why?
Use all of it.
What would be your answer to that question? What would you say to that?
Yeah, look, compounding works best on the biggest numbers. And my view is always buy the best quality property that you can afford or that your borrowing capacity dictates. And it's about rinsing and repeating that process. Because look, the reality is you only need to do that 3, 4, 5 times over the course of your entire lifetime, and you can amass tremendous amounts of wealth.
Yeah. Well, I've discovered that personally. I'm I'm having my birthday on the weekend, mate. I'll be in just on the other side of 55, and got a great bunch of properties, and I've just watched the compounding growth is phenomenal. I've got one property in my portfolio. I spent, what was it? I bought it during the GFC, and I paid 860,000 for it. It's a classic little post-war home, 3 bedroom, had a little granny flat out the back. That same home today, based on a comparable sale, hold your breath, is now worth $3.1 million.
Wow.
That's just one property. Now,
Phenomenal.
I haven't had to dig too hard into my own pocket to hold that property. When it first started, probably the first 3 to 4, maybe 5 years, it was negative cash flow. But
Yes.
after that period of time, it's pretty much washed its own face, and I'm just gradually increasing the rent. But the capital growth, it's tripled, more than tripled in value since I've held it in 2008. So, like you say, if you can get onto the right trajectory as early as possible in your journey with property and making that an absolute part of your plan, it's going to do really well.
It's so important to keep it boring because what I often see is that people try and tinker.
Yeah.
And one of my first mentors, who was a very successful fund manager, and he was teaching me portfolio construction. And he said, Jackson, play with your partner, not your portfolio.
Yeah.
People do more damage mucking around with their portfolio
Yeah.
and trading assets and speculating than they
Yeah.
do just by holding and sitting on their hands and doing nothing.
So,
And look, I'm yet to see a client who has been grateful that they've sold an asset, particularly in Sydney, that they looked back and said, "Oh, that was a phenomenal decision. I'm so happy I sold that property in French's Forest."
yeah. That's a good question. It leads me to my next question for you about this whole thing we're going through right now with trade and Trump wars and all
Yes.
tariff wars and stuff. But what are some ways that people could stay more disciplined and consistent with their long-term financial goals, particularly when we've got all this disruption happening around the world? How do you stay on track?
Well, look, I think the big part about this as well is, once again, most people don't have these wealth building systems or frameworks in place. And one of the things we do with all of our clients is we help them build their own investment philosophy. And it's so important because that gives us rules and gives us a reference point, particularly in times of high emotion. There was a great book that I read many years ago that was introduced to me by a mentor of mine called The Outsiders.
Yeah.
And it talks about unconventional CEOs who've been able to build businesses that have stood the test of time and produced 100x returns on shareholder value. And what it all ultimately comes down is that those people were able to stand the test of time, even through hardship, is because they were pragmatic in terms of their viewpoints. They had a long-term perspective. They had autonomy and they had frameworks around their thinking, and they were independent in that thinking. And they aligned the trajectory of their organization and the people within it with those objectives over time.
Yeah.
And I think for most people, they make knee-jerk emotional decisions because they don't have a reference point and they follow the crowd. And you need to be contrarian in many cases if you're going to make money. As Warren Buffett said, be fearful when others are greedy and be greedy when others are fearful.
Yeah, and the other point I'd make to that too is don't take your advice necessarily from social media or any media. Don't just get advice from someone at the barbecue. Look at mentors who've walked the path before you, and don't chop and change your strategy all the time. As you say, getting in and out of property is super expensive.
Yes.
Yes, shares are liquid, but at the end of the day, you could trigger a capital gains tax event. You know what I mean? So just be careful chopping and changing and going after the next cryptocurrency play if it's not the right thing and you don't understand it. So
Exactly.
tell me, Jackson, how can people reframe their relationship with money and become better stewards of wealth?
One of my books that I wrote, my third book, is called The Family Vault. And one of the most powerful tools that we use with our clients, but particularly we use when it comes to creating generational wealth and helping our clients build empires that they can hand on to the next generation, is about this transfer of tacit knowledge and experience and using a reflection loop as a means of improving the quality of the decision making over time. And very few people do this. The idea of a reflection loop is being able to get really clear on your perspective of what it is that you're working towards or what it is that you're trying to achieve and documenting that. It comes back to that point we spoke about before of the goal setting, right? Then it's obviously about doing the work, taking the action. But what most people forget is to do the reflection, that once the work has been done, taking pause and reflecting on what was my perspective and how much did that overlap to my reality. And if we think about those as two overlapping circles, is it completely overlapped where your perspective is basically a mirror image of what actually happened?
Yeah.
Or are they barely touching that you are so far out of this world in your perspective and the reality is so far removed that you're dreaming? And then it's about then asking yourself, well, why did that happen? And how do I get those circles overlapping? So one of the exercises we take all of our clients through is actually about documenting their most important financial lessons, both good and bad, over the course of their entire life. And we give our clients a list of about 40. I cover them in my book, The Family Vault. So it gives you a starting point. And it's about just recapping on those experiences. Hey, okay, I had this particular situation happen. This is how I dealt with it. Here's why. This is what I learned. This is what was good. Here's what was bad. And it's like the situation where when you're forced to coach or teach somebody else, you get better. Because you have more details, you've got more nuance.
The teacher has to internalize it. It's got to be coming from a point of real knowing. I like that. Yeah.
Bang on. So that's the best way to reframe.
Cool. Okay. And talking of teaching, what about sort of young people, young adults, children in the early stage? What's your perspective on teaching them about wealth mindset and money matters early in life?
Yes. It's never too early. And I think for the vast majority of people, they leave it too long. And the key part here is that if you are committed to being a wealth creator, that you're going to amass a significant amount of wealth, if you do not pass the values and the operating systems to your children, you are setting them up for pain and failure.
Yeah.
And this is the reason why the vast majority of generational wealth is lost by the third generation. And they call it shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves. And it is because those people have not earned the stripes in order to manage that money, and therefore they are frivolous and it becomes a curse.
Yeah, got it.
And the best thing we can do for future generations is to give them so much that they can do anything, but not so much as they choose to do nothing.
Yes.
And get them to a point whereby the education you impart to them is more valuable than the inheritance. And they say, hey, mum and dad, in fact, I've got this from here and I don't need your money.
So good. It's about a couple of thoughts come to my mind is that I've loved to teach. I've loved teaching my boys about money and property matters particularly. And, when they were a bit younger, I gave them an Excel spreadsheet. I said, this is how you should save. And they both set up their own little businesses from a fairly young age and, gone on to be really quite, reasonably successful even from a young age. And, for them, we're going to be helping them get into the property market. But as you say, giving them a little bit and teaching them how to manage money, but not so much they become complacent and just, I just want to hand out. I think that's really important. So
bang on.
Tell me about maybe, without telling names or whatever, but just an aha moment that a client has had after working with you that maybe completely transformed their financial journey.
Yeah, look, the interesting thing we've had a number of clients reach out to us over the years who have been in significant financial hardship and have almost been on the verge of folding their businesses and losing everything. And it's been through going through this process and understanding the value of the plan and having the aha moment of having simplicity and having clarity and having confidence in the direction of how that dissolves the barriers to action and ultimately have been the source of procrastination. Because what I feel is that for the vast majority of people, they have overcomplicated the pathway. And as a result, that is the reason why they're procrastinating.
Yeah, right.
It's the reason why they're not moving forwards. And if only they could simplify the steps to make it almost to the point where it would be silly for them to do nothing, it changes everything.
Got it. Yeah, great. Fantastic. I want to ask you a little bit about who or what has most inspired or influenced you, particularly around money and mindset and financial freedom. Tell us what's been the inspirators for you.
I think my biggest inspiration is my parents. Like as a kid, my parents were tradies, and I saw them work incredibly hard. They were very, very good at what they did, but they never had any money. We always lived hand to mouth. And I very quickly realized that they were working for money as opposed to money working for them. Yeah. And I wanted to set out create a catalyst for that change and master the language of money and help people like them. And that's really my passion of avoiding other people having to go through those same mistakes and go through that same hardship, because it can certainly be avoided. And in my opinion, there's no such thing as a financial person. Like, you don't have to have a mathematics degree or an economics degree in order to be a great money manager and amass a tremendous amount of wealth. You just need to learn the fundamentals, and it's just because these things haven't been taught widely and broadly, and people make it too complicated.
Yeah, see, I find actually, to be honest, the academics are probably the worst ones to teach money management and wealth creation. You know, they know all the theory, but they have no idea of the practice when it comes to life, mate. So, mate, I've got a couple more questions before we wrap up shortly, but what's the biggest myths that you'd love to bust right now when it comes to wealth and freedom? What are the things that are burning on your mind? Oh, people just get this wrong. This is a big myth.
I think this comes to the fact that wealth building and creating generational wealth is reserved for the elite few. I think that's probably the biggest one.
Yeah.
I think that for many people, they also feel like wealth takes a lifetime. And if they haven't started at 18 or 20 and they find themselves in their 30s and 40s, still kind of standing still in that comfort stage, that it's too late for them.
Yeah. It's never too late.
And yeah, it's never too late.
No.
I've had clients come to us who are in their 50s and 60s and have been able to make significant progress in terms of their wealth and have been able to amass considerable amounts of wealth in a relatively short amount of time. Once again, it comes to that mindset. He who said he can and he who said he can't are both right.
Yeah, love that. So if someone's listening to this podcast and they're starting from scratch, what's the first thing you'd recommend they do to start wealth building with intention?
You need to get educated, and you've got to take that vested interest in learning. So it's about getting books, whether it be my books or whether it be listening to podcasts like this, or just going on YouTube. It's never been easier to get educated.
Yeah.
And it's just important that you find the right people who have a track history, that have experience, that have credibility, that have done things that you want to do and that align with your values, and listen to them intently and gather that education.
Yeah, love
and you need to take action. It's about a good idea in theory will remain exactly that, just a good idea until you put it into practice.
Yeah, love it.
So you need to take imperfect action, and the hardest momentum is always that initial momentum. And if you feel like you need that accountability, then you've got to surround yourself with the right mentors and advisors that are going to hold you to that standard and get you to push harder.
Yeah, beautiful. Jackson, I've got one last question for you, and it's about legacy. What legacy do you hope to leave as you work through as the wealth mentor?
Yeah, interestingly, my partner and I have chosen that we're not going to have kids. And I think for many people, their children are a big part of their legacy. And for me, my legacy is my thought leadership. And my goal is I want to write 100 books before I die.
100? Good on you, mate. Well done.
Yep. So that will be my legacy that I leave in the world. And I want to be known, hopefully, as I get to that financial abundance stage and once I'm no longer of this earth, that people can look to me as a legend of this space, and that I really made a mark of helping business owners like my parents create financial freedom and take control of their money. And that's essentially what legacy means to me. So everything that I do in my business and everything I do in my thought leadership all centers around that legacy. Oh,
mate, that is fantastic. Well, Jackson, I can say that your workshops are full of practical advice for any business owners out there. Highly recommend you get in touch with Jackson. He's got some wonderful ideas all around wealth creation, setting up financial plans. So, mate, thank you so much for coming on the Property Buyer Podcast. Really appreciate your time today.
My absolute pleasure.
Thanks for being with us on another Property Buyer Podcast. If you have a question you'd like to ask, please click on the SpeakPipe link and we'll answer this during the next episode. If you're looking to buy a residential or commercial property in the near future and would like to get the added advantage of having a buyer's advocate on your side, then please reach out to my team today and send us your inquiry, and we'd be delighted to help. Please visit our website at propertybuyer.com.au, where you can stay updated with all my latest market updates, weekly blogs and live suburb profiles to help you make better property decisions. We look forward to connecting with you again on the next Property Buyer Podcast.